Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, aka Caliban, and rock climbing, Joe. Rock climbing. I'm joined on this episode by Joe Mazel. Joe is a writer, podcaster, and professional nerd, and he's one of the hosts of ABCD TOS, the only podcast that goes alphabetically through all the episodes of Star Trek, the original series, from All Our Yesterdays to Wolf in the Fold. He's also one of the hosts of ABC Devo, going alphabetically through the songs of Devo, and he's a general podcast raconteur. Joe, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here, and may I say, you did the intro to my show far better than I ever do it.
It's great to have you. Permission to come aboard granted. Today, we'll be talking about Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. At the close of the 1980s, things were looking up for the Star Trek franchise on screens both big and small. Over the course of the last 10 years, Paramount had released 4 successful TOS films, culminating in the blockbuster success of 1986 Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. And every week, 10 million households were tuning in to the continuing adventures of the Enterprise D on Star Trek The Next Generation, a series with an audience share that modern shows could only wistfully dream of. It seemed like nothing could derail the Trek train, but God had other plans, and so did William Shatner. With the success of the previous Trek films, particularly the ones directed by his friend and rival Leonard Nimoy, the Shat thought it was high time that he should get a chance to direct. What he got was a production plagued with issues of biblical proportions, including a writer's strike, a teamster strike, scorching desert temperatures, and a showdown with Batman. When God closes a door, he usually opens a window, but this time he's nailing the window shut and setting fire to the house. And it became an open question if the Trek cinematic franchise had reached its final frontier. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First, Joe, it's great to have you on the podcast, and I always ask first-time guests to the show how they first discovered Star Trek. How did you become a Star Trek fan?
It was just always on. My parents liked it. Friends of my parents liked it, so... You know, it's New York, the mid-'70s, when Star Trek syndication was all the rage.
Yeah.
By which I mean it was on probably once a day on Channel 11.
Yeah, I mean, that's a similar story for me, just, growing up. And, of course, everybody knows, by now that it was huge in syndication, probably more popular than it was when it was on, in first run. And just being sort of swimming in it, always knowing that Star Trek was on, somewhere on the UHF channels of my youth. Yeah.
Now, did you get, it's like, even with people who are born into Star Trek, there is a sort of I'm going to make the conscious decision now to become a big Star Trek fan. Did you have that at any point?
Probably when TNG came back on, or came on for the first time. And knowing that, this is connected to the old one in some way. Okay, interesting. And seeing, Encounter at Farpoint and seeing a robot character, who could mimic other people's voices. What was going on with that? And more women on the bridge, and just getting a sense of this is the same thing. And then my parents were never big sci-fi fans, so that it wasn't that thing for me. But my uncle was a big TV fan, and so he had always watched Star Trek, and he was excited about this show, not because he was a diehard Trek fan, but it just seemed like a cool new show. And so I remember feeling that connection with him and thinking, okay, I gotta get into this. And then of course, all through junior high and high school, the show after show after show was okay, I guess I'm a fan now. Was there a point that really solidified it for you when it was now I'm going to be a Star Trek guy? Yeah,
well, I mean, again, like you, I always liked Star Trek, and I guess around 10-ish, by which I mean 10 years
anyone?
old. Yes. Alfred Lloyd, 10-ish anyone. Okay. So, I guess roughly around 10, I discovered Starlog magazine. So it's I really like Star Trek. And then when I turned 12, the local syndicated station that did Star Trek started doing it at midnight. Or I don't know if they started when I was 12. I realized they were putting it on at midnight when I was about 12. And I was at my grandmother's house for the summer, and my grandmother got her first VCR. And just I can tape this, or I can stay up late and watch this, or I can tape this. And that was the summer. It's sort of now I know every episode in order,
Yeah. It was like that for me too, having your 4, maybe 5, if you're rich, VHS tapes that you set on SLP and you're just recording TV off of. Yeah, certainly those first 2 seasons of TNG, there are 4 or 5 episodes that I had taped, and I know just so much better than the rest. You know, there's some that are like, I kind of remember this one, but I remember the one where they go to the planet where the women are in charge. Oh my God, and Riker's wearing perfume. I can quote every line of that. Well, going from TNG to TOS, you've got your podcast, ABCD TOS, and you're watching every episode of the original series, and you're getting pretty near the end of your journey at this point. I think you're in the W's.
Yeah, we are in the W's. I think we have about 3 left, maybe 4 left on the outside.
Oh, okay. Is there, now looking back at the end, is there anything that you have learned about the original series that you didn't know or realize the last dozen times you watched it?
In terms of stuff I didn't know, have you ever read These Are the Voyages?
I've read passages of it. I have never sat down and read them all, though. Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, toward the end of the series, I decided to do research.
Yeah.
But like I listened to the audiobook of the first season of These Are the Voyages, and let's see, I realized, wow, Gene Roddenberry sounds like an impossible man to work with.
Yeah.
You know, where it's literally like Robert Bloch, Ted Sturgeon, Harlan Ellison, all of these people were, you know, high names in science fiction, and all of them Gene Roddenberry felt he knew better than, even though he'd never done anything science fiction before in his life.
Yeah. As long as you don't care at all about your script making it to screen, he's easy to work with. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm in a similar situation where, you know, this is going to be the last year of this show, and when it's finally over, I'll have time to read These Are the Voyages. So I'll have a lot of things that's like, maybe I'll just keep tweeting about all the things that I'm learning at this point. I know another book that I want to read is Star Trek Memories, which I've never read. I've never read a lot
of
Star
Trek Memories is good. I know this is going back 20 years ago, whenever they came out. I think over 20 years ago. I remember enjoying movie memories more.
Okay.
I think because movie memories can like break down into, you know, at the time, the 7 movies. Because I think Generations is in there, but don't hold me to that. But it could, you know, break down the 7 movies where, you know, Star Trek movie memories could not go through like every single episode and talk about details. And William Shatner probably didn't remember half the things that happened on the show.
Yeah. One of the things I like about TOS is how well documented everything is. It's weird for a show that it is a holy document for fans, but like 55 years ago, we know who was on the set at what time and where. And also there are so many different perspectives and personalities. You know, if you read Inside Star Trek, written by the producers, they have a totally different view of it than, say, Bill Shatner would, or the reminiscences of Gene Roddenberry from conventions, or what David Gerald has to say about it. And so I like the fact that somebody someday, and there is Mark Altman's 50-year voyage book, and of course
Mission Log. Yeah, there's podcasts they did.
Yeah. So there's this like sort of living oral history that doesn't necessarily exist in like one great place, but it's just like everybody has a different opinion about what was going on set.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look at sort of the support staff of Star Trek, where it's like, and I love George Takei. I mean, I love all the cast of Star Trek on some level, but like I love George Takei, but you kind of have to wonder, really, what did you know about what was going on? You were a day player. Let's really put this in perspective. You know?
Yeah, like you were in your trailer, like doing pull-ups, getting ready for your shirtless scene. You know, what did you know what was going on? Yeah. I know you've worked at a number of comic book stores, and thank God I finally have someone to talk about comics with on this show. 7 years, hundreds of guests. None of these nerds are into comic books.
What's wrong with these people?
They never even read anything comic-related except the seat assignment on their Marvel movie ticket stub. So my long nightmare is over. Finally, I can ask you about comics, specifically about Forbidden Planet. Pete the Retailer's been on the show a couple times. And, of course, you guys worked together at Forbidden Planet.
That's how we met.
And Forbidden Planet, of course, one of the most famous comic shops in the world. And I want the scoop, like any Planet stories. Dish on Forbidden Planet.
Oh, man. Let's see. Well, you know, there were all those Forbidden Planet NDAs I signed, so
of course.
But, you know, I worked there at this really weird time where, and, you know, it's over the period of 3 years, but it's this really weird time where, like, the original owner of Forbidden Planet was going belly up. He sold it to a kind of, like, consortium of nerds and, well, a consortium of, like, you know, old comic collector types. And also the original owners of Forbidden Planet in England, and also this just guy who is really into trendy stuff. Like, he was the guy who's like, you know what Forbidden Planet needs to carry? Furbies.
That's been great for the comic industry.
Yeah, exactly. So it was this weird kind of like, I mean, when I first, at one point when I was working there, I was just like, so just so you know, Joe, we might be closed next week. And you're like, all right. And that went on for like 2 months. Like, okay, we're definitely going to make it through Thanksgiving. But after that, don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
Which is weird because that kind of news sort of got out. And it was kind of obvious because like for about a 4-month period, there was virtually no stock in the store. And the stock we had was from this guy, Joe Koch, who has this warehouse in Brooklyn, who's one of the owners. And it was just random garbage that he would bring in from his warehouse. Didn't really matter what it was. Sure. It looked it's like, wow, this is Forbidden Planet. This is the chintziest looking, this looks like the Halloween store on November 5th. Just like half-filled shells, and there's nothing anybody would want.
Yeah.
But you'd get but since it kind of got out, and there'd be like customers who would just be like, you sold me a gift certificate, and I heard you were closing. And at a certain point, we kind of knew we weren't going to close. It just takes a long time to rewrite that ship, and trying to explain to people, like, no, we're not closing. We just got new management, and blah, blah. No, you're closing. I want my money back. Oh, like, okay. Well, you're not getting it back. So... Right.
Yeah. How about this? We take it in Pokemon booster
packs. We take it in Pokemon cards. We have some old Pogs.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I know a couple retailers, comic retailers in town, and I never realized until I got to talking to them how much of owning a comic shop on your own is like having stock that nobody sees. Things have changed in the industry, and a lot of those stores have closed. And a lot of these friends of mine, they don't have a physical store anymore, but they are still blah, blah comics because there is a warehouse somewhere or there is a series of storage units that has all of their, their back stock still. So they exist as an entity, but there is no store anymore. And it's just like there's been so many different changes in the industry, obviously over the launch of digital platforms. But even before then, things, have been changing quite a bit.
Well, there's also a fact, and I've worked for a lot of comic stores, and I have a lot of friends at Forbidden Planet, and I don't exactly know what's private and not private, so I'm a little bit leery to talk about that. However, I also worked for Rory Root, who was the owner of Comic Relief in Berkeley. And Rory Root was a self-promoter. I wouldn't say he was a good one, but one of the things about comic book stores, these are people who have no business owning a business a lot of the time. Like, sure. They have a lot of stock because they bought more than they could sell and then refused to get rid of what they couldn't sell.
They're fans, yeah, sure.
Yeah, they're fans, but you'll go to comic stores and you'll see, like, for argument's sake, a Grendel statue that came out in 1995 that has 20 years of dust on top of it, but they're still trying to sell it for its retail price of $300. And it's like,
right.
You put it on, wipe it off and cut it by half. Maybe somebody will buy it, or put it online. Which is the other thing, like Rory Root was a big fan of like, oh, well, we didn't really do that well, Joe, so can you wait till Monday for your paycheck? And like, I mean, I have to because you're the one who's giving it to me.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have that safe there that has, among other things, like an Amazing Fantasy 15 in there and like, just so like, 2 long boxes of absolute treasures that are over $1,000. There's this magical site called eBay. You could sell those books there and make a profit.
Yeah.
Unless you're waiting for somebody to randomly walk in your store who has, 10 grand on him when he wants to buy an Amazing Fantasy 15.
Right. Yeah. I want to pay full price for this.
Yeah.
No less. I remember it wasn't too long ago that comic shops were a very different type of establishment in more ways than one. And a lot of those changes have come about because of the audience, a change in the audience. There was a store by where I live where you go in and half the store was just packed upright shelves, plastic, with dusty plastic wrap back issues that looked like a scene from Seven. And the rest of it was, dark and dank. And that store moved. It moved recently, and now it's totally different. It's got a lot more room. It's bright and friendly. It has these nice display cases, because they're hopefully looking to get customers in beyond comic freaks like you and me.
Yeah. Well, there's this weird period, when we were growing up, a comic store was like a shack with a bazillion comics in, and we're 8, and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing, Then it became that sort of like 90s speculation boom where it's sort of like, why is this comic that came out last week now $50 and hanging on your wall?
Yeah.
And by the way, and now looking back and having worked in comic stores, kind of after that boom was like, and I know for a fact you have 7 boxes of them in your back, behind you, and if you sold them at retail price, you'd actually make a profit and probably sell that stock. But what do I know? But then there's that weird period where it's like the comic store is really the toy store. Here's a rack of comics on the wall, and here are, 500 action figures. Now it seems like Peter out, like, we have comics, we have graphic novels, we have toys, and we're clean enough that you won't be embarrassed to take your significant other into a store.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that. I don't want to say, I say junk in a nice way, but like I've seen that junk side of the business kind of move into its own business now. Like there's a couple different stores near me that are just curio stores, that have the action figures, the toys, the back issues of Starlog, all that stuff that would be in the corner.
Go on, give me the address, please.
Yeah, if they have a mail order. And so like maybe comics is sort of like reconcentrating back into comics and comic related material. I think the card business is always going to be there as well, just because it's easy to sell and it doesn't take up a lot of space. But, another way the industry has changed is, and it pains me to say this, is that it's still a work in progress. Comic shops are becoming more friendly for families and for women in particular. And I remember as a young man, not too long ago, or maybe longer than I'd like, going to the local comic shop with my girlfriend and her being really uncomfortable and me not understanding
and for good
what the
reason.
problem was. Yeah, right. Well, you don't like that standee of Red Sonja bent over? I don't understand. Yeah.
For some of these stores, what you say is exactly true. But on the other hand, I remember, and this is going back a couple of years, when the Preacher television show came out. I go into this store, and there was a guy, there's a guy who worked at the store, presumably because he was behind the counter, speaking in an incredibly loud volume about how much he hated Preacher, especially that bitch who played Tulip. And you're like, and his language was far saltier than I'm giving it credit for, but it is, but it was just like, dude, why do you think people want to hear you generally? Forget about it at a comic store. If you were sitting next to me at the bar talking to your friends, I wouldn't want to listen to you, let alone in a business where I don't want to necessarily hear conversation so much as I want to buy a product. But also it's like, do you know how many people you're potentially alienating or not? And maybe that's why it's Saturday at, 1 PM and there are only 7 people in your store.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's just, people don't have manners. And the other thing, like with the reality of like the business of comics, like I've seen a lot of retailers question why some stores are very successful and some stores aren't. And it's partially some people are willing to work harder and make sure they have a stable like mail order business and really search for back issues and do a bunch of other stuff. But a lot of it, and it's just the reality of the business, like Forbidden Planet will always do well. Also in Manhattan, Midtown Comics will always do well because those are on street corners that have an incalculable amount of foot traffic. Like if you told me 1 million people literally walk past Forbidden Planet on a Saturday, I wouldn't not believe you. I'd say like, yeah, that sounds like a realistic number. But a place in a strip mall in the middle of in the middle of Pennsylvania, you have to like comics to go there, and there are only so many people who like comics,
And you've got the tools now, like poor you in the mid '80s. Like, what do? Either people show up or they don't. But now you can actually send things and ship things to people. One of the things that I love about sexist comic book fans or Comicsgate ding-dongs is that
those people.
They hate that things are changing and they think there's some kind of agenda. And it's like, yeah, the agenda is to tell some kind of new stories with this white male character who's been around for like 70 years. And they've had to reboot 8 times because, what can you do with Thor at this point? And I have to applaud publishers like Marvel and DC who, especially now that they're seeing success at the movies, I think they could just keep plugging forward with more Thor stories. But
sure.
But or listen to their toxic fans. But in spite of them, they said, no, we're doing more stories about diverse characters of color, LGBTQ characters. You can call it a shrewd business move to put more diverse stories in there. But better representation has been the result.
Oh no, it's definitely true. I mean, one saving grace I found about the Comicsgate ding-dongs, when you take out the kind of like. When you take out the jilted creators, the Ethan Van Scivers of the world, I realized something like, because I spent the first like maybe 3 months of the pandemic, completely isolated and just like engaging, which means insulting these like idiots on like bad comic site message boards. But like I realized something, these are all teenagers. Like there's a video about. Did you hear or did you see the like where's my comic Ethan video? Mm-mm. You can find on YouTube. It is basically this like 16-year-old kid, stereotypical nerd, theoretically yelling at an imaginary Ethan Van Sciver because like he's 2 years late publishing one of his terrible Cyberfrog books.
Okay,
and I realized it's like, oh wait, these are the Comicsgate people. They're children. There's like, I mean, they're children who are completely wrongheaded, but like there's no point in engaging with them or arguing with them because you can't argue with the child. Yeah. And also these are people, like a lot of people on the far right who just have these circular closed reasoning that, like Ms. Marvel was a failure, really? Because it made like $750 million. Like, yeah, but Avengers made $1 billion. Like, right, okay.
Right. Yeah. Every fact is just somehow proof of their hypothesis. Yeah.
Exactly, which is completely wrongheaded.
Yeah. And it's sad that has become the caricature of the comics fan because, comics, when they started, everybody read comics. Boys, girls, adults read comics, So, I mean, they really are for everybody. And bringing it back slightly to Star Trek for a second, there's an inherent moral message in so much of comic stories, probably because of the serial format. Just like Trek, these little morality plays is an easy story to tell in short form. But also because, like, it's about good and evil. Like, it's about people being different, people trying to get people to accept them. And I love an X-Men fan who hates people who are different than them. Like, do they root for the Sentinels? Like, what is the value of them reading the X-Men? I don't understand.
Yeah, the other thing I love, and this is particularly true during the Trump administration, but did you ever read the Captain America arc that Mark Waid and Chris Samney did? Mm-hmm. If you remember, there's this sort of like, in the future of Earth, there's this like mutated despot. And if you kind of wink or close your eyes, it sort of resembles Donald Trump. Yeah. And like right-wing fans were all up in arms, like, you're clearly just insulting us and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what does it say about you that you see this gross mutation with little hands and you immediately say, that's my president. How dare you, sir?
Yeah. I love the, utopias and dystopias have always been popular in sci-fi, and they sort of go neck and neck in terms of what we get the most of. And I don't know where we are right now, but I love the fact that utopias are always like Star Trek, where they're like, where's the money? Oh, wow, a lot of diversity here. Like, nobody ever tries to sell you on a fundamentalist utopia because,
it ain't utopia.
Exactly. Like, the game is up at that point, right? So I just think that, like, fiction tells you, like, the truth of a lot of our life, our modern life. Do you have a favorite comic that you're reading right now?
It just ended, and I just finished it, but Immortal Hulk I thought was fantastic.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Really loved Immortal Hulk. And at this point, I'm reading mostly like the big Marvel characters in terms of superhero stuff. I always read Usagi Yojimbo. Anything that Ed Brubaker puts his name on, I'll immediately pick up. And his crime graphic novels, I think, are absolutely fantastic. What he does with Sean Phillips.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. And there's always oddball stuff. Like I have a problematic need intervention addiction to like Silver Age Marvel omnibuses.
Okay. Sure.
Every time I look at what's coming out, like, oh, in 6 months there's a Defender omnibus, and yes, I realize that it's the Bronze Age, but it's like I can't wait. And
sure.
I also know exactly how much I'm going to enjoy it, which is probably about a 4. But still, the idea of it exists.
Gotta read it. Yeah. I'm the same way with older comics, like original, like early Daredevil is not great. Kazar is hanging around, Stiltman. There's all kind of weird stuff going on, but it's just like, oh, what happens next? He pretends to be his own brother. Oh, okay, this is plausible. Okay,
he doesn't pretend to be his own brother. He pretends to be his own swinging brother.
Yeah, right. He's a swinging Mike. Yeah. In addition to being a comic fan, you're a film fan as well, and you studied film in college. Is that right?
Yeah, man. Where did you get your research from?
Oh, I'm like the Hot Ones guy. I can do everything here. Have you been satisfied by the Marvel films so far?
Yeah, Marvel films are a blast. I mean, in terms of are they cinema argument, it's like, I don't care because I like them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, who's right? Exactly. I'm going to the movies to enjoy myself. Like, what do I care? I don't understand. Well, I guess I understand being an artiste with an E like Scorsese and seeing, a cartoon make more money than, The Irishman or whatever it is. I understand like why he brings it up, but you think that he made a movie, Hugo, about the magic of movies,
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Old man yells at cloud, news at 11. Yeah.
Well, and God knows I love Scorsese, but there is a sort of thing when if you look at Scorsese's career, and granted Scorsese at least kind of attacks it from a somewhat thoughtful perspective. And it's not like these are bad. It's just they're not movies. They're amusement park rides. It's like, okay, fair enough. But the weird thing with Scorsese, it's like, well, none of your films ever made money. Like if you read a biography or read an interview with Scorsese, like even the film, I mean, uncontested classics, sure, but like I think look this up to make sure that I'm not talking out of my butt here, but like Goodfellas was not that like I'm sure it made its money back, but it wasn't it wasn't the hit, it wasn't the Titanic of its time, let alone the Avengers, Star Wars, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And the other problem I have with the kind of like critics of our movies are too silly now, it's all superheroes and comic characters. It's like, but that's always been true. I mean, yes, there have been. Yes, we could talk about various classics from the 1930s or 1940s, but there's also Francis the Talking Mule, the series. There's also Ma and Pa Kettle, the series. And it's a bit more I guess quasi-serious, but like, what is Tarzan but a cartoon character? And there are like 40 Tarzan movies, And, this is true of like blaxploitation or biker films or like, there's always a lot of I love genre film like you wouldn't believe. Exploitation films are like my main vein, but there's a lot of things that are generally considered low class that have always taken up a lot of what's shown in theaters. I
like the Marvel films, and I don't want to sound too extravagant in my praise. I don't want to belie my cool guy exterior, but the state and the wealth of comic book films today, especially the Marvel films and their quality, it makes me feel glad to have been around for it. I wasn't really old enough to fully appreciate as an adult the original release of the Star Wars trilogy, but they've become this kind of legendary thing that changed so many people's lives. And I mean, they're fun movies. They're good movies in that way. But it feels kind of like that, like getting to watch them launch this project and take it through, a decade, up to the point where Thor and Iron Man and Captain America are fighting Thanos, and they land this thing with Endgame. It's like, I'm glad I was here to see this. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's...
Because we talked about these movies for years in comic shops. I know you did too, like how cool it could have been. And DC fans are like, how cool it could have been. But like the Marvel films have been generally, very high quality and very, if not true to the specific letter of the stories, the spirit of the stories.
Thematically, they're pretty much spot on. And a lot of times, and I wish I could think of a specific example, like, you know what, the changes are probably a little bit better. Yeah, you have to have like Helmet Zero not be like a character that's been around for 50 years and part of the Masters of Evil and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just... Yeah. You do have to condense. That's what adaptation.
He can't wear a pillowcase on his head for the whole movie. That's not going to work. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, like you have to condense it. You have to adapt it. Like you can't literally have every beat. And like in short, they're fantastic. Well, they're great. I really enjoy them. Fantastic might be pushing it.
Speaking of being fantastic, though, I was thinking like, where do we go from Thanos? You can only get bigger. Maybe we face Galactus next.
We're going to face my dog.
Yeah. Tell me about your dog, Galactus.
Oh no, I got a 3-year-old pit bull that my parents and I adopted, I guess in October, and she's a very loving dog that also, I can't really see, but like will scratch the crap out of me.
Okay, all right. Yes.
And it took her a couple of months to realize that, like, while biting my fingers might be a fun activity for her, well, chewing on my fingers, it's really not so hot for me.
Yeah. What am I getting out of this?
Yes.
Scars. Yeah.
Oh, but she's gotten better, and constantly adorable. So.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of her. She's really cute. Slight spoilers for the most recent Marvel release, Doctor Strange,
which I did not see.
Oh, okay. Maybe I will talk then obliquely about the possibility of a Fantastic Four film in the future, which Marvel has on the books, but I feel like they have it in a way. We hear all kinds of plans about things that they're doing, years down the road, and then as far as Fantastic Four, they go, here's a 4. And fans like you and me are like, this is so exciting, but really there's nothing concrete at this point. Yeah. Like, how do you envision them interpreting the Fantastic Four for the 21st century?
What I always thought would be super neat, and on one hand I'd say they're never going to do this, and on the other hand, when you, Diane, and Pete and I were hanging out in Chicago, we talked about, like, there was a point, Pete used to have a joke that was pretty much... if you want to like ruin the, after X-Men 2 came out, if you want to ruin this thing for everybody, this like, good superhero movie, you should have in the next film like a space pirate come down and announce that he's Cyclops' father. And then nobody will see these films. But now it's gotten to a point where like, yeah, you can do that. They
would absolutely do that.
Yeah,
yes.
Like the Eternals had Pip the Troll in it. Like it's not.
Right. Yeah. In fact, it's almost becoming self-conscious now. Again, when you see Doctor Strange, this will, make more sense. Yeah. But like, that last scene is just like, what the hell is this going to be? Like they want, I was going to say girlfriends. I'm an old nerd. They want significant others to lean over and go, what is that? Who is this person? They're like kind of aiming for that crowd now.
And but to my point of what I would love, and it's probably too ridiculous to ever happen, is just like a portal opens up, the Fantastic Car comes out, and Reed Richards and Grimm says something to the effect of like, what the heck? It was 1965, 5 minutes ago. Yeah. And just go from there. Like just have Kirby and Lee's Fantastic Four just translated and just immediately beamed into the modern world and almost play a little bit of the Captain America getting, being a man out of time a little bit, but also having, the scientific super genius of Reed Richards. I stumble over my own words talking about how much I would like to see. Yeah. I'm so excited about this thing that doesn't exist and is all in my head.
I could see them doing that, especially now that almost the entire 10 years of the Marvel films leading up to Endgame were set, in the present. They kind of counted off in real time. And now with newer films, they're taking the time to kind of go back and backfill their universe, their own sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so Quentin Tarantino wanted to do Casino Royale, when Sony had the rights still, and he wanted to do
I remember hearing
piece
that. Yeah, I remember hearing about
50s.
That. Yeah,
I almost think that they could just do like a period piece, like do one Fantastic Four, keeping your idea that's just a 60s kind of Mad Men period piece, and then they get sucked through Evil Dead style at the end into the future or whatever it is,
which is pretty much what they did with Captain America.
Yeah, more or less. It already worked. Yeah, well, I'm excited about that too. I love the Fantastic Four, and Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm are probably like two of my top 5 Marvel characters. Which reminds me, as a New Yorker, from
where is Yancey Street?
Yeah, right. Yeah, there was the most recent, or maybe not the most recent, but when they brought the Fantastic Four back after they'd put them in jail. And Dan Slott was writing, there's a scene in one of the comics where Johnny and Wyatt go to a baseball game. They go to a Mets game. And Johnny's up there having a great time singing about meeting the Mets. And I'm like, Johnny Storm is not a Mets fan. There is no way that Johnny Storm is a Mets fan. Johnny Storm, I don't know if he lives in the Baxter. If he doesn't live in the Baxter building, he lives in some loft in Tribeca. There's no way that he roots for the Mets. And I wondered as a New Yorker what you thought about that. He's a Yankee. He's a damn Yankees fan the whole way.
Well, I mean, the Mets are the people's team,
right?
Obviously,
Yeah.
Like I could say, like Ben Grimm, definitely a Mets fan.
Sure.
If we were to keep the whole 75-year continuity of Marvel, he started off probably as a Brooklyn Giants fan, and then when they went to Los Angeles and the Mets came to Queens, he became a Mets fan.
Yeah.
I would like to think that the Human Torch is a Mets fan because I like to think deep down he's a man of the people, despite his airs, despite his classic car collection. Like I mean, the fact of the matter is when you chip away all the layers, he's just he's just a guy who likes to root for like the underdog. And that's what Mets fans are.
I could see that. His douchiness is one of the things that I really like about him.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I don't want to believe that he's a Mets fan. But I can see your
reasoning.
reasoning.
But don't you love the douchiness because deep down he's going to do the right thing?
Yeah, I think that. That's okay. I can see that. So he probably wears. He wears a Yankees hat on the street, but at home he's got his Mets cap on. Yeah, for sure. Well, when I got in touch with you and said that we were going to be talking about the films of Star Trek on the show, and I suggested that we talk about Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Is that what the show's about? It's not just us rambling about comic books?
Oh, well, I mean, we can go back to that as well.
No. We should get on track here.
We
got to row our boats.
Yeah, merrily down the stream. It's a film that, let's face it, we all make allowances for the things that we love. We all have guilty pleasures that we'll argue for, but Star Trek V is more or less technically, objectively bad. I think it's safe to say.
I mean, my problem with Star Trek...
In terms of execution...
here's the thing. I'm going to say that, It's not, yes, it's sort of like, it doesn't work. It's really uneven, but first of all, there are moments I really love. Second of all, and this has become really clear after Mission Chicago, and that is, I love Star Trek, and I love these characters. And just seeing, Spock, Kirk, and McCoy hanging out together makes me happy.
Yeah.
And the three actors, I think, have a great chemistry with one another. Like, it's just sort of, I want to see him at camp at the base of El Capitan. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
And there are moments like, I think the opening of, Cybok finding the Road Warrior reject in the middle of the desert.
Just digging holes. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think that's sort of, Shatner swinging for the fences and trying to do Lawrence of Arabia. That's one man in the distance in the desert and just panoramic views, and that looks great. And there are other shots that look great. And then and again, I'm just talking visually here. And then there are things like everything involving ships looks terrible, except for maybe the stop motion of the Klingon cannon on the bird of prey, which kind of reminds me of the Ed 209.
Yeah, I like a good stop motion. Yeah.
But a lot of the ship shots. And I don't even know if they were. I would assume they were models due to the time, but they could have been very archaic CGI. But they really look like archaic CGI. Like, they don't quite match. It just, they're not quite flying. For lack of a better term, they're not quite flying right. Like, it doesn't. There doesn't feel like there's any weight. I don't feel like I'm lost in reality. I don't feel any reality to them. You have a lot of ancillary characters that don't really go anyplace. Like, I love David Warner, but you'll have the what's her name, Caitlin Tarr, the Romulan ambassador. She first gets to Paradise City, and they're like, oh yeah, no, this is the universe's asshole. Nobody comes here. Can I curse on the show?
That much, yeah.
Okay. This is the universe's butt crack. We can't. There's we're basically exiles here. Which is well, I'm about to change all that. And I'm like, oh, okay. You're not, because here comes the Vulcan and the insurgent army, and there's nothing there. Yeah.
Either she succeeds through gumption or she's ground down. We don't know, because it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's it's a short movie, and so there was no way nowadays this would be 3 hours long, and every single one of those things would get its own satisfaction.
And I think this kind of movie needs it a little bit. And then the other hand, and the third act is all right, well, we're about to end this movie. We better get to the third act. I don't even think you find out that Cybok is looking for God until the hour and 20-minute mark.
Yeah,
of an hour and 50-minute movie.
Yeah. Which, for a short movie, I think it's okay to keep that sort of under wraps. Like, he wants something. Then we find out it's totally beneficial. And all the things you've been talking about, like their criticism of, the idea of an international peace process, a hellish planet, a guy looking for God. None of these things are funny. And yet this film swings as hard as the last one did.
There's a lot of
funny.
big humor swings.
They try, yeah. And I think trying to be funny, was one of the bullets that killed this film. Although this film went down like Sonny Corleone. There were a lot of bullets involved with this film.
No, and I mean, there were a lot of production problems. And to be fair, this film came out on my 15th birthday, June 9th of 1989.
Okay.
A week, maybe 2 weeks earlier, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade comes out. The next week, Ghostbusters 2 came out. The week after that, Batman came out. And on and on. That summer was insane with major tentpole films. Even ones that didn't work but were still hugely hyped, like The Abyss. You had Lethal Weapon 2, License to Kill. I'm a big James Bond fan. License to Kill to me is a lot worse than Star Trek 5.
It's not great.
No, it's not. But with that said, it's like I said, I love the chemistry. Some of the jokes I think work really well, and then Shatner or Harv Bennett just go that extra mile, and be like, no, we just can't have a joke about Scotty. We have to have him bonk his head on a pipe.
Yeah, it's a live action cartoon in some places with Kirk falling off the mountain, and they're doing rocket boots up the elevator shaft, and and they work. I think for Star Trek fans, I would trade any number of great TNG or DS9 moments for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy camping and all but recreating the campfire scene from Blazing Saddles. For me as a Star Trek fan, that's great. I think a average viewer who maybe likes the films or doesn't know Star Trek very well coming in is just not going to get it.
Care. Yeah.
And it's unlike Star Trek 4, which is people, we understand the fish out of water. They're from the future. They don't know what exact change is. Yeah. Is that the first time? Did you see it on your birthday when you were
Yeah,
15?
so my 15th birthday.
What was your 15-year-old response to it?
I thought it was great. I mean, I was 15. It was Star Trek.
Sure.
I had no critical faculties. When the next week, when I saw Ghostbusters 2, that I did realize, like,
wow.
this isn't as good.
Okay.
But Star Trek 5, it took me multiple viewings and, kind of the vox populi to realize that, it has problems.
You were educated about your opinion. Yeah. Was Ghostbusters 2, or do you remember like seeing the first movie that you saw that you should have been excited for, but you were like, oh, I think this is bad. This is a bad movie.
I don't know. I want to say Teen Wolf 2, but I don't know how excited I was for it so much as, okay, it's Christmas week. I'm at my grandmother's house. This is the one film, this is the one PG film I can see that, this is the one sort of like kids film. Yeah. Or even like teenage film as opposed to, I don't know, whatever. I don't remember what year Teen Wolf 2 came out exactly, and but like 88, yeah, something like that. So. But like, I didn't want to see. And now I'm blanking out on like the serious film I had in my mind. Shirley MacLaine, Jack Nicholson, people dying of cancer.
The Apartment.
No.
Oh, no. No, sorry.
Wow, you really radically changed the plot.
I thought you said Jack Lemmon, Jack Nicholson. Yeah. Terms of Endearment? Terms of Endearment.
Yeah. Which I think is now earlier, now that I've said it. Who knows? The joke's not going anywhere. The point is, Teen Wolf 2 is one of those things that, like, I'm certainly, watching a movie is not something I had a problem with, like, as hyperactive as I may have been in other aspects of my life, I was always like, put me in front of a movie, I will sit down and watch a movie. Teen Wolf 2 was one of the times I remember, like, I don't want to sit still. Do I have enough quarters to just play arcade games for a while in the theater lobby? Like, this is terrible.
I have no idea what it was for me. I know it did happen at some point where you go from that, like you said, you're a child, you have no sense of critiquing something, to being like, this isn't good. Ironically, it might have been, and I love the film now, but it might have been 1989's Batman, because I was, as all kids are, a Batman fan for a long time, and I had read a lot of the comics and the great Batman comics of the late 70s and early 80s.
Like when you grew up with the Adam West Show?
And the Adam West Show, true, yeah. And then seeing the Burton film, it's so, it is a Tim Burton film, and I really like it now, but it was so different than what I wanted it to be and kind of expected it to be, that I remember thinking like, oh man, I don't like this. Movies can suck. Oh, this is horrible. My life is totally different.
It's weird.
But I was an idiot.
I was almost the exact, like, I saw it opening day, and I think partially because, it was opening day for the most hyped movie of my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I, and I'm waiting outside the theater for like 3 hours or something to see the, first matinee.
Sure.
So it's sort of like I pre-programmed myself to like it. But then a couple of weeks later, like, I'm going to watch Batman again because this is my new favorite movie. And it was, it was a trial to sit through it. And now I kind of have made my peace with it, but it was just sort of like, and there are things I love about it, and there are things that I could have used a little more Batman in this Batman movie.
Right? Yeah. And it's significant that we're talking about it when we're supposed to be talking about Star Trek number 5, I guess, because came out the same year, same month, actually. Let's talk about the technical details of Star Trek 5 really quick. Of course, it is Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier. Came out on June 9th, 1989. The screenplay is credited to David Lowery, but the story is written by William Shatner, Harve Bennett, and David Lowery. It was directed, of course, by William Shatner and produced by Harve Bennett. The stardate for the film is 8454.1. It had a budget of $33 million and grossed $52 million at the box office, $70 million worldwide, and it is rated PG-13 with a runtime of 106 minutes, not the shortest Star Trek film. That would be Insurrection at 103 minutes. And something we do on the show, Joe, is you get an assignment. Can you give us a 25-word synopsis of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier?
25 or less, or exactly 25?
25 or less, sure. Kirk stops, meets God.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Pretty much. But the Enterprise is kidnapped by a religious zealot who wants, I'm at 10, to go to the planet of Eden to meet God. There, 20 words.
God. You made it. Nice. Okay. Yes, Eden or Shakari or whatever those other names were. Yes.
In the Andorian language, it's unpronounceable.
We don't bother with that. Yeah. talking about the budget of the film, it sits in the bottom 5 of Trek films for total revenue domestically. The bottom 5 go Generations, Undiscovered Country, Insurrection, Final Frontier, and Star Trek Nemesis, all adjusted for inflation. Ratings-wise, it's also in the bottom, and the bottom 5 are Insurrection at 54% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is interesting. The motion picture actually got a jump this year because of its re-release. So now at number 10 out of 13 is motion picture at 48%, Generations at 11 with 47%, Nemesis 38%, and at the very bottom, Star Trek V with 22%. And Nemesis made $9 million less than Final Frontier, but they are 16 points apart critically. So people have it in for Star Trek V. You've got your work cut out for you if you want to convince people that this is a good film.
Well, and good is, pushing it.
And these ratings also, just to note, all the Abrams films are in the top 5 of Rotten Tomatoes ratings.
Sure.
So what do the ratings mean? Yeah, exactly.
And like something like Into Darkness, just to, it was kind of a curveball or a sucker punch. I don't really even know what the proper sports analogy term is for it, because everybody liked it the week it came out, and then 2 months later, critics included, were like, you know what, that wasn't so great. Like, and I think that's sort of the magic of J.J. Abrams. Like, he he can shine a turd well enough that it'll take you a little while to realize it.
Right, yeah. The icebox moment of being like, wait a minute, that doesn't work at all. Only it lasts a little longer and it's a lot bigger. It's like a deep freezer moment, yeah. The making of the film, as we've discussed or mentioned, was a total disaster. But it had interesting origins. Shatner originally wanted author Eric Van Lustbader to write the script for the film.
Author of The Ninja.
The Ninja, yes. Also, he continued the books of the Bourne series after the death of Robert Ludlum. And maybe it's The Ninja, I'm not sure, but supposedly he had a series of novels about an American character trying to adjust to living in Japan. And Shatner thought that would be a good perspective for a movie focused on Spock, the idea of being an alien in a human culture. But the deal fell through. I think Lustbader wanted too much money. And so Shatner looked to inspiration from another place, TV. He found himself watching one of the famous televangelists of the era, Jim Baker, and he imagined a character like a televangelist in the Star Trek universe and what they would be like, specifically wanting to focus on what he saw as the predatory nature of these people, televangelists, sort of exploiting people's faith, their desire for connection, which is weird because the movie doesn't exactly follow through on that, but we'll get to that. And of course, screenwriter David Lowery was chosen to script the film. He had previously written the 1984 movie Dreamscape. He also went on to write or co-write Three Musketeers for Disney, Passenger 57, and Money Train as well. All classics. But the 1998 writer's strike brought a halt to writing on the film. It also affected the second season of TNG. It gave us Shades of Grey, and it shortened the pre-production of the film. So they're already behind the gun, like as this thing is starting. And it's interesting to note the similarities in the premise of the film with Gene Roddenberry's original pitch for the motion picture, which is often titled The God Thing. Yeah. Which became later the inspiration for, or the script for the Phase 2 pilot. And it is, Roddenberry, of course, hates all the Star Trek films, or hated all the Star Trek films. But he supposedly for years really blamed Shatner for kind of stealing this idea. And nobody's ever figured out if that's true, if Shatner even knew about the idea. But you get the idea that, like, they talked to each other, they spent time together. So maybe at some point Gene had floated this idea to him. But I think it's hard to patent.
It's also sort of, 3/4 of the plot of the episode Way to Eden. It's this weird thing to be angry about. Like, there's at least 3 episodes of gurus that turn out to be not what they seem.
Who, by the way, that is a specific criticism. That's the kind of criticism that Shatner seemed to be going for. The idea of, this guy's a charlatan. He's going to, take you to a planet where the grass burns your feet or whatever. Don't listen to these people. And that is, Roddenberry's atheism, I think, definitely evolved, over the years. But that was right up Roddenberry's alley for a story that he would want to tell. But then it turns into this kind of emotional, sort of spiritual meditation on what do we think about when we think about God? What are we looking for when we are talking about reaching for something? And for some people like Kirk, it's the family that he's created, that God is in the human heart, like he says. For other people like Sybok, he wants to find God, but he also seems to genuinely want to help people. Like he is helping them.
No, he's not malevolent at all.
Yeah, it isn't like he just goes, "All right, I fixed you. Now get me a sandwich." He wants to bring all these people with him. He wants to be this.
But I mean,
Moses.
see, if you think about it, if somebody fixed you, isn't that worth a sandwich?
Yeah, right. I mean, if it's not too much trouble.
Yeah.
Turkey on rye, yeah. Budget concerns obviously constrained the entire production. Shatner had envisioned this apocalyptic finale on the Shakari planet that would involve these rock monsters. Rock monster! And he wanted 6 rock monsters. He can only get 1 rock monster. And, of course, you can see the famous test footage on YouTube of this.
And that 1 became 0.
Yeah, Power Ranger-looking kind of guy. Didn't work exactly, so they had to cut that. ILM, of course, had worked on the last 3 films and had worked well on them. But like you mentioned, it's 1989. They're working on a ton of other stuff. This is the late 80s. The sci-fi blockbusters in full swing, so they were unavailable to work on the film. There were a couple of mishaps that occurred during filming. Just before shooting began, the Teamsters went on strike, and the production started looking for non-union replacements for them, and they were worried that the union might try to retaliate. And one of the production's camera trucks blew up in the parking lot. So the production got a police escort to the Yosemite National Park shooting location after that. At Yosemite, there were a ton of problems. All of Shatner's climbing scenes were accomplished with camera trickery, where they set up a fiberglass fake face of El Capitan in the parking lot, with El Capitan in the background. But apparently they set it up wrong and the framing was wrong, so that there was like a tree in the foreground of the shot, and it ruined all the forced perspective. So they had to reshoot all those scenes later. The Paradise City scenes were shot in the Mojave Desert on location, and the heat was 110 degrees. Shatner didn't take it very well. There was a lot of snapping at people and tension on the set. And apparently they told the drivers to leave. And so he and the crew were stranded without a driver, and they had to call a park ranger to come and pick them up and save their lives.
That's, if you pause for a second, that's interesting because the only note I ever heard about Shatner's direction was from George Takei. And in Beyond the Stars, he said something to the point of I was dreading going on set for Star Trek V. I hated Bill in general, and just the idea of him being my literal boss was just this is painful, but whatever, I do one movie every 2 years. This is how I have to pay my rent.
Yeah.
And, I remember Takei saying something to the effect of no, but Shatner was as kind and as generous as a director that you could imagine.
That's great.
He was very good to us. And conversely, Leonard Nimoy, who everybody liked as a person, I've heard as a director was very aloof and very distant from the cast.
Interesting.
Yeah. Huh. But it's interesting, I never heard about him, snapping at people. I mean, granted, if you put me in a 100-degree desert, I'd be snapping at people too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he got so I don't know if people know, but there's this clause in their contracts, Nimoy and Shatner, that was set up back in the original series where
they both had to balance each other out.
They both get the same things if they want them. Yeah. And so that's one of the reasons that Shatner also credits Nimoy with his desire to direct, not only because, this frenemy of yours is got 2 big movies, but I think Nimoy had just said, yeah, you should do it. It's not that tough. It's fun to do. I think you would be good at it, Bill. And so Shatner wanted to do it.
And lest we forget, 2 paychecks?
Right. Yeah. And a writer's credit too. Yeah. So there you go. We talked about how summer of 89 was a rough time to release a blockbuster film. Batman was out, Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Sean Connery was an early choice for the role of Sybok, but he was busy shooting Last Crusade when this movie was made. Yeah. But he's still in the film in spirit, as the mythical planet Shakari was apparently named after him, which is it's kind of a Zardoz level of okay, I guess I can kind of see that. Yeah. I'm assuming, speaking of 80s sci-fi movies, I'm assuming that, like me, your personality and tastes were forged in the fires of 80s films.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 80s films and comic books, and, of course, Star Wars and and Jaws and, some late 70s blockbusters, too. Yeah.
This film is in the vein of 80s sci-fi movies, I think. It's asking big questions. It's got slightly shaky effects. And it, wasn't successful at the time. I mean, it made its money back, but not enough to really make a profit. But it's definitely got something of a cult following.
No, there is, as I said, as my opening salvo, there are good things in this movie, or at least things that I think are charming.
Yeah.
And there are some good ideas. It's just, it's one of those, and it's something I've come across, a lot on ABCDTOS. It's one of those things where it's sort of like you could tell that different scripts had different aspects and nobody really finally sanded off the edges to make one real script. Mm-hmm. Like, like I said, certainly the Romulan ambassador saying like, well, I'm here to change things. And like, okay, well, that went away. Yeah. If you look at the end of the movie, David Warner is like has his arm around the Romulan ambassador.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, well, where do we go from here? I'm like, wait, was there supposed to be a romance between you two?
Yeah.
Which would make sense because David Warner's had a high enough stature that's a weirdly small part for him.
Yeah.
You have like, actually the Klingons I sort of like, but again, you don't announce that God's coming until basically that the whole point of this movie is God until like the hour and a half mark, hour and 20-minute mark.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of weird sort of like things like this is minor in the scale of the other problems, but like, okay, so were you camping with Sulu and Chekhov, or did they just happen to also decide to camp at Yosemite, even though this is the Star Trek future, so they could be anywhere on the planet Earth that they can beam down to? But, it's not like we're taking the shuttle down,
Yeah.
Like, they could be anywhere. They decide to go here. Are you camping with them because you're not mentioning it? It seems like a weird thing. Like, were you just tagging along? And it was like, all right, you guys go there.
And there's three really good friends, and then there's some other guys that are kind of friends, but is it weird for them to go along with you on this camping? Maybe they invited themselves along,
which
they couldn't say no.
And with that is another kind of odd thing. Okay, so now Kirk has served with this crew. Kirk has, managed this crew, served with this crew, whatever the better phrasing is, for 25 years at this point. And these are men and women who committed mutiny, who threatened to not only to spend the rest of their natural lives in jail to save their pet buddy Spock. Mm-hmm. And there is this weird thing that this film has with keeping the core three together and keeping all the support staff as support staff. Mm-hmm. It occurred to me as I watched the film for the second time in 24 hours, right before we recorded, okay, so you end with basically like, we're all family. Well, I thought men like us couldn't have families. I'm like, well, I was wrong because we're a family. I'm paraphrasing the dialogue. And then the last scene is the three of them, camping again at El Capitan singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Like, why isn't Scotty and Uhura there? Why aren't you all fat? Like, why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult for classic Star Trek? And I think the answer is Bill Shatner, to acknowledge that you are a group, the seven of you, not us three and the rest. And I get how the TV show works out like that, but like when you get to the movies and you sort of like, all right, you're making the effort to like theoretically, if Walter Koenig decide, I don't want to do this film, there's a very good chance that Star Trek V would have been shelved. I mean, it's like part of the scene of Star Trek movie is getting to everybody. And yet there's sort of like ignoring the fact that this is everybody and they're all supposed to be pals.
Yeah. I don't know if it was because thinking about them all palling around and hanging out in TOS is almost unthinkable. I just don't think it would happen. And nowadays, like maybe it was Star Trek The Next Generation that really like set the 7-character thing for a genre show. But now any 7-character genre show, they're all going to be buds and be friends and be together. And it kind of starts here and it definitely grows in TNG to the point where now we're like making pizza and we're hanging out and whatever it is. And I'm fine with that. I think that's fine. But I don't think that had really come through at this point.
Well, but
and
you talk about Star Trek 4 has weird breakups. Like Sulu and Chekhov, Uhura and Chekhov hanging out.
Yeah, and we start to see it definitely in 4, 3, and then into 4, we start to see the ensemble get more to do. And I just think that it's I just think that you mentioned that there are loose ends in this film, and that's absolutely true. But I think there's a lot of interesting closures of things that have been set up previously. And I think it's important that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are all together, not just because they're the trinity of Star Trek, but they're kind of paying off what has happened in everybody talks about the trilogy of 2, 3, and 4, and never the quadrilogy, because Bennett, produced this one too. And Nimoy and Shatner are both involved. And they're finishing off what I think of as the story in 4, where McCoy is trying to reconnect back to the resurrected Spock and never really gets there because he's not quite himself.
Because he's hanging out with Scotty for the entire time, too.
Yeah, well, and that too, yeah. That's fun. But in 5, though, like, I like the fact there's that scene at the very end where Kirk comes up and he's like, gentlemen, cosmic thoughts. And McCoy says, we're just speculating about something. They're kind of, all through 4, he's like, what's death like? Mm-hmm. And now in 5, we don't get to see it, but they've been having, it suggested this conversation and like they are now back together again. They are gelling again once more as this family. And of course they hit the nail on the head with Kirk's speech at the end. But, I think that's really
actually,
nice.
One thing I love about Kirk's speech is like, I had a brother once. I lost a brother once, and he came back. Also, I lost a brother another time to a giant fried egg, like jellyfish monster.
Yeah.
You were there. You remember. It was really an awkward weekend.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I saved his mustache. Yeah. They didn't want to confuse the issue a little too much there. It's only nerds like us that would get mad about something like that. But I got one of them back. Yeah. Not quite as powerful. But I think that's, and then having Cord, General Cord. He's Ken Peck in TNG, that actor. He's Cord in this. Having Cord there and then having him be, the guy that diffuses the claw thing at the end while you've got this runner of claw, which is almost like a joke because almost every movie there's some Klingon, antagonist chasing them. And this guy is just a complete non-element. But it's like that kind of closes up nice. I like the fact that Kirk is climbing the mountain at the beginning. He's climbing this metaphor. And then at the end, he's climbing a mountain as well, trying to get away. And so there was screenwriting was done on this film in a way that I think a modern movie you would just try to get away with effects and get away with the charisma of the actors and characters.
Yeah, no, the book ending of the camping, I believe it's on Shakari, like Kirk saying something to the effect of maybe life is but a dream or some some throwaway line referencing.
It's in it's in their 10 forward when he's like. That's when he touches the little thing where no man has gone before plaque, which is a plaque that you have on your ship.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, wasn't that plaque originally, isn't that supposed to be on the bridge by the turbo lift?
Is it?
I always thought that was the sort of plaque on the original show that you see. If you're facing the turbo lift, it's to your right. Once they put in 2 turbo lifts, I don't know how they worked it out.
And it says where no man has gone before?
I mean, you can't see it.
I never knew that was diegetic.
I always thought it was.
Okay.
But I never... That could be something I completely invented, but I always thought,
They
but
found
anyway,
it floating in space after the Genesis planet blew up. That's the last part of the old Enterprise that they recovered.
And even the reference to sea fever, was it John? That's John Maid's really? I'm well versed in the classics. Really? Then how come you don't know row your boat?
Yeah,
there are a couple of little clever things, and then there are, even solving the get out of jail free card of the transporter by having it disabled from the very beginning.
Right.
Works out.
Yeah. And even somebody was paying attention because everybody is marveling at what they're seeing on Shakari, and Scotty's like, I don't got time for that. I'm fixing the transporter. So, okay, so he did fix the transporter. Yeah. Good continuity.
Yeah, so you have a couple smart things.
No matter what people say about it, it's a well-crafted film.
In some ways.
In some ways.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You'll have, again, this nice Lawrence of Arabia opening shot, and you'll have the shot where it is the tracking shot that is, or maybe it's a panning shot, but the shot that reveals that the bird of prey is right behind them.
Yes.
It's kind of like a panning shot of everybody looking at the view screen at Shakari and marveling at the magnificence of God, and then it sort of pans and you see on the screen the Klingon bird of prey is on the whatever the equivalent of the starship radar is.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's a really good shot. It's weird how awkwardly you placed your daughter in it, Bill.
Wow. Yeah. The fact that she's here, period. But I mean, she does all right. Let's, okay, so I want to talk about these themes more, but we have to stop on the road and meet Sybok, played by Lawrence Luckinbill, who I think is fantastic in this. And you keep bringing up the opening scene, which he's good all throughout the movie, but I think he's really great in that scene. You immediately understand who this character is. You don't understand his motivations necessarily, but you get that this is a strange, charismatic figure. Mm-hmm. And again, it's good writing, good directing to establish that he's so intense that he has some sort of power, some kind of influence. And then, of course, anybody wearing a hood in Star Trek is going to pull it back, and we're going to see the ears.
Yeah.
So we see the ears, and the guy's like, oh, my God, you're a Vulcan. And then just the boisterous laugh as we pan up. And what is this Star Trek movie going to be? Like, that is a great hook to open it. And then
wacky hijinks.
Wacky hijinks ensue, yeah. I think we can owe all of this film to Shatner just flipping through TV late at night, because apparently Shatner discovered him on TV as well, playing LBJ, I think, in like a TV movie. And he just thought, like, this guy's great. I want to get this guy. So all of his ideas come from late night TV. You know, we're just missing Gilbert Gottfried and a pocket fisherman. But a little nepotism doesn't hurt either.
We really are missing Gilbert Gottfried in the podcast.
Yes, yeah, get him back. Maybe a little nepotism doesn't hurt because, of course, Luck and Bill is married to Lucy Arnaz, Desi and Lucy's daughter. And I just discovered this recently, but he's the uncle of the Wachowski sisters. So
I had no idea.
A lot of Hollywood history in this one guy. But yeah, I think that he is great in the role. And I think it's, you know, it's a movie, so we're not going to return to it. But I think it's a shame that, stick him into TNG somehow or get him back somehow. I definitely hope that they try to do, since we've got this new Strange New World show that, you know, Spock is on. I'd love to see a young Cybok show up on Strange New Worlds. Like, the idea of this character, I always like the idea of like a wild Vulcan or a passionate Vulcan. And anything that we know about them is just speculation, I guess, or extended canon. But the idea that there are some Vulcans who aren't like, you know, crazy savages, but they do follow their passions as much as regular Vulcans follow logic. I think that's fascinating.
Now,
to coin a phrase.
Oh, yeah. No, yes, I would agree. That is fascinating. Here's the thing with like Cybok. So did evil God kind of plant the idea of Shakari into Cybok's head, like at some point in the recent past, or was this like 20 years ago when he broke away from the the Vulcan logic path?
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those little things. Like, I don't say you need to explain it, but maybe it would help. Like, if it was like he meditated 6 months ago and suddenly he had this vision, and therefore he concocted this plan which got him to Nimbus 3. Yeah, that would be nice to know.
I picture him like Gandalf in the Fellowship of the Ring when he goes to Gondor and he's looking through all the books and he's spending, months like researching things. He says Shakari, and some other characters seem to know what he's talking about. So clearly, like, this is, a legend that exists in some corners of the universe. And then he equates it to the idea of Eden or to Sto-vo-kor and other paradises. But yeah, like, where did that idea come from? Has the evil entity been sending these waves out for years, for centuries, trying to get people to come in to him? And who put the galactic barrier up? Again, I'm sure this is all answered in some book somewhere, sometime now.
Well, but you bring up a good point. Like, there's one of these things, like, we never find out, other than, well, 2 points. We never find out what exactly God is. And, you could have 2 sentences to the effect of, I was a celestial being of the Gamma Quadrant who was, betrayed by my brother gods and, like, placed behind this great barrier so I could never, like, murder people again. But, like, something would be nice. But you don't really get that. And you also, on the converse of that, you have, like, wow, it's kind of weird that William Shatner is very specific about what God can and cannot do. Like, I'm God. Well, how come you don't know my name? Why would I? Like,
yeah, right, yeah.
Why? Because the Bible says I should,
Yeah, yeah.
Did the Bible also talk about the Great Barrier? Okay, no. So why are you bothering me about this?
I need a starship because it'd be weird to see, like, Jesus wouldn't fly around outside the Enterprise. Yeah. He wants to walk among you, right? So
because I sprung a leak in my space boat, Captain.
Actually, I think I know why he wants the starship, because he wants to join with it. He's going to have sex with that starship. Is what he's going to do. That's what this is really about. It's a booty call.
Yes, that would do it.
Everybody in the movie is fascinated by this idea. Now, we know that there's kind of a divide between TOS and TNG in terms of where the state of religion is, let's say, in the future. But there isn't any character who's like, I don't care about this. Like, even Kirk is like, maybe we need to check this out. And that could be his explorer's spirit. But I wonder, everybody seems so ready to accept the idea of this paradise. What do you think about, like, the idea of religion in Trek, or at least, well, in two aspects. One, the presence of religion in their future, but also Trek delving into not just metaphor, like more explicit religious stories or spiritual stories.
Yeah, well, it's a weird thing because on one hand, like the end of Bread and Circuses always makes my eye rolls with the like, don't you understand? They're not worshiping the sun in the sky; they're worshiping the Son of God.
I think it's really in the original conception of Trek, like TOS. I think it'd be a big stretch to see it as a completely faithless society. And like as I mentioned, I think that Gene went from kind of agnostic to hardcore atheist as he evolved. But
well, and who mourns for Adonai? Like, we have no need for gods. The one is enough. Yeah.
Yep. There's a weariness behind that line and that line reading. Yeah.
But there's this weird kind of thing about classic Trek, and this goes into TNG. And Deep Space Nine, and I'm not as familiar with Voyager, but I would imagine it's still there, where there's a part like, does God exist doesn't matter because every culture that they encounter, not every culture, but many cultures they encounter at various points in civilization have their own belief system.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it is comparable to, like a Judeo-Christian ethic, and sometimes it is something you contrast it with. But at the same time, like an ongoing theme of Trek is fake gods, or what we thought was a god was an alien, or you have the followers of Val in not the chain in the Apple, like you have these. Like you have charlatans and fake gurus are a big part of original Trek. And I kind of remember them there in TNG and too. I just haven't, I haven't spent the last 3 years watching like Star Trek: The Next Generation on a weekly basis.
I have. I think there's a strong reactive criticism, I think, to religion in TNG, and it's even more interesting because it's in the 80s and the 90s. So around when Shatner is like flipping through TV and going, these televangelists. That's when we've got enlightened Jean-Luc Picard ready to throw himself off a bridge because they accidentally reintroduced religion to this society of these proto-Vulcans. He's like, oh my God, we've really screwed up here. We have to change this. So I just think that like there is I don't want to go so far to say anti-religious commentary, but definitely a more humanist, bent to Star Trek as we get into that. Then we transition into DS9 and they're like, well, what's the difference? You've got aliens that are essentially gods. If you want to worship them or feel a closeness to them, then fine, who cares?
Well, there's also, I remember, I think it's in Movie Memories, that one of the original pitches for Star Trek V was, what if the Enterprise meets God and turns out to be the devil?
And there's
still, and there still was a point in, production being in 1988 probably, where like, that's not going to fly in the South. We cannot,
right.
Like that's not a bad idea, but we really need to rework that.
No, God cannot be the devil. Yes. Right. Yeah. And I guess that's what we get in a way in the film, in that this character is masquerading as a benevolent force, but is actually a negative force, which I guess the South missed this. They don't ever really clarify all that much. They definitely meet a being who has all the pomp and circumstance and majesty and shows them all these many faces. And he's not God, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Like, I guess the devil can lie and say that he's whoever, but like we never really get that fine of a distinction. This guy throwing lightning bolts and he's got a big beard. Like, it kind of seems like God, or somebody's idea of a God.
There's one thing that sort of bothered me in terms of production was all the God faces. When it's like, I've known by many faces, kind of like whack, whack, whack. They're really quick to flash at you, and it's too quick to like. Wait, okay, maybe that's a Klingon? I don't... They all just kind of look like old men with beards. Like,
Yep.
We've had many faces of a patriarchy.
Yes, well, okay. It's okay if evil God is a patriarch. That's fine.
So I have an idea I wanted to throw at you.
Yeah.
And this is theory I just came up with, so if my strings aren't fully tied, please understand.
Sure.
I think Starfleet hates Kirk.
Yeah. You think so?
Well, okay, so hear me out on this. So Paradise City is, again, butt crack of the universe, and it seems that, like, you are punished by being meant to be the ambassador of, like, the Federation, the Terran... Is it the Terran government or is it the Federation? Because I keep referring to David Warner as a Terran, But I assumed he represented the Federation.
I don't think they know, but I assume that he's a representative of the Federation, yeah.
A representative of the Romulan Empire who's new and young and, again, and a celebrated Klingon who's now past his prime and put out on a nice flow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and again, the one settlement is a dump. You have a cat lady, you have water pool, but it seems like the entire civilization is based on
triple-breasted cat lady a year before Total Recall.
Yes. They were ahead of their time.
I just wanted to mention there's a little detail in their little Star Wars cantina. It's got the Old West saloon doors, but they go shh, shh, like Star Trek doors, which I just, after my 20th watch, I saw that and I loved it. Sorry, go ahead.
So anyway, these three dignitaries, and I'm using that in very big air quotes, are captured by some terrorist zealot. Commander Harv Bennett, that's Harv Bennett, right?
Admiral Bob. Yeah.
Basically assigns Kirk to deal with it, even though it's like, but our ship is a disaster. We don't have a transporter. Yeah, I know, but you should do it. Like, but I mean, really, the ship could fall apart at any time. Like, oh, we need Jim Kirk. I'm like, you need Jim Kirk to take care of like Drunky O'Halloran, and then
yeah, right.
That guy smells like 3-day-old cigarettes.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm needed for. And literally, in the established shot of the Enterprise, the Excelsior is right there, which is despite
how bad
crew,
did Scotty mess it up?
Yeah, which is the superior ship. Theoretically, what with the transwarp drive and all, like, why are you sending me to this? And then if you think about it, if you extend this to like 6, it's like, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have somebody who hates the Klingons,
right?
Manage our peace, who we really want to set up as our patsy.
When you think about the fact, though, that in Star Trek VI, the deep state of the Federation did want a war with the Klingons, so the best thing to do is to send the guy who's probably going to get in a fight with them, and when we fake an attack on them, nobody's going to doubt that Jim Kirk was behind it. So that's my justification for that.
Yeah, but I mean, again, that does not speak to loving Kirk at all.
No, they want to throw him under the shuttlecraft.
They don't like
him.
Yeah.
The whole Paradise City thing is, it just comes and goes. But, I wonder if it's Star Trek is, maybe Star Trek's getting out of this now. Cause I don't know if you've seen, how much you've seen of the newer Star Treks, but like they just finished this second season of Picard.
I just finished the second season of Picard myself.
And it's set in the modern day, our modern day, more or less. And a lot of fans speculated, are they going to try to make a commentary? Are they going to try to tie it into the DS9 episodes that were known for their commentary that are set during this time? No, not really. It's just going to be a roller coaster of admittedly fun stuff. And I think maybe sometimes
you do see trash cities, like hobo jungles. You do see, and within while they never necessarily, and a lot of stuff about ice actually,
and
a lot of stuff about immigration.
Early on, they do talk about that.
And but when they're in the alternate future, it's a totalitarian. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Yeah,
it's a totalitarian government where like Kirk is known for like beheading everybody. Which, by the way, was kind of cool. They had the like display of skulls at Mission Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, beheading definitely a pastime in that future. But I feel like Trek, it definitely at this time was stuck in this thing where we have to have a comment on something, even if we don't have something to say. And so, the 80s, the end of the Cold War, at least the detente is happening. They didn't know.
No, Star Trek VI is definitely a metaphor.
I can't wait to talk about Star Trek VI when they predicted the fall of the Soviet Union before it happened. And so they need to have some kind of comment. And the comment is, boy, governments sure can't figure it out. They sure can't get together, and they're not committed to the peace talks and things like that. And it's like, it's kind of like a weak take on it, and it doesn't really matter because we move on. But like you said, this is how we're introduced to the film. Like, we are being led to believe that these people are important, and they are not important really at all.
No, I mean, and they're treated like garbage. I mean, it's sort of, again, like what's his name, St. John something or other is Yeah, he is completely disposed to the fact that, like, yep, I'm finishing out my life here, getting drunk with this fat old Klingon.
Yeah.
Who, again, I can't imagine smells that great.
No. Yeah. I'm going to play some literal pool later. It's pool where there's water on the table for some reason. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, playing some water pool. You mean water polo? Nope, water pool.
Nope,
it's a billiards table just with an inch of water on top.
Yeah.
How does that affect the fellow? Yeah, don't ask, don't tell. I don't know.
We'll drown a cat in it later. Don't worry about it. So yeah, it's just.
Oh, which, by the way, how in the hell does Kirk throw the cat lady?
I don't know.
That is the most ridiculous.
How does he make it up El Capitan?
Hoists her, and she flies 10 feet in the air. Like,
it's good nutrition. Future people are different. Bones has been, keeping him going all these years. So it has this comment, and it extends to the spiritual side of it too. Like, what's the comment? Like, do televangelists, do charismatic leaders take advantage of their followers? If so, then like what's Sybok's sin here? I do like the fact that the movie does float something as his sin, and the devil god nails it. It's his pride. He is a benevolent force, but he also believes in his quest to the point that when God at the end is like, you like this face, don't you? And it's him. I love that idea. And Sybok is completely destroyed by that. Now, we don't get to sit in that at all, because this is the Indy 500 of third acts. We got to get through it. So he just goes back to Spock and goes, sorry about that. I got to go. And then we're out. But it's like the message that it's trying to deliver is completely muddled. But maybe it's just to make you think, interesting, deep thoughts. Yeah, religion, I guess.
Well, you have this thing where it's sort of like, okay, so I get don't follow gurus, but some gurus are nice people, I guess. So make up your own mind with that. Don't believe in false gods, but you really don't find out if they're false until they're shooting laser beams out of their eyes at you.
Right. Yeah.
There's this whole, there's a bunch of mixed metaphor. And then, the kind of non-socio-political themes, which is just sort of like a family is what you make, not what you're born with. I mean,
sure.
That's great. That's great, but it's also not, but it's not socio-political.
Not groundbreaking. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, don't lie to Uhura about being lost in a blizzard at El Capitan with Chekhov, because she has the weather monitors on her screen, man.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about the runner between Scotty and Uhura, which nobody ever picks up or does anything with ever again. No. But apparently for like 2 weeks, they had a whirlwind romance, or at least a whirlwind flirtation where they ate chips together. And that was about it. And then she got drunk and he didn't take advantage of her. And then we never talked about it again.
Yeah, I mean, I do sort of like that. I do. First of all, like, it makes perfect sense that, two people who've been working the same job, for 20 years, even if initially it wasn't there, might at some point both kind of be attracted to each other, just in a way that's mostly platonic, but there's a weird kind of energy there. And who knows, it's a little bit of a will they, won't they energy.
Sure.
And I like
Plus, he's always down in engineering and she's always on the bridge. So they haven't spent enough time together to hate each other.
And I also, one thing watching the original series intensely in the last couple of years is Scotty's really bad with women. So it's kind of nice.
No, he's not great. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, so as far as I know, Montgomery Scott, he loves whiskey, technical journals, and being awkward around the opposite sex.
Yeah,
so it's sort of nice that he just has a nice relationship with Uhura, and even in this movie, he's awkward with her. She just, she's known him for 20 years. She loves the guy, so she doesn't care. They're like, you're the most understanding female in all the galaxy. It's like, put it, maybe take it down to a 7. But
right. Don't stab her. Let's start there. This film tries and somewhat succeeds, I think, to explore the idea of trauma and pain and how we deal with them. And of course, we focus mainly on our 3 guys. I can only speculate as to what the ancillary cast's problems are. What is Chekhov's pain, other than being burned and going, "Aye"? But we don't ever know what that is.
Also, it's where we learn that apparently Vulcan babies remember being born.
That is amazing, that Spock can not only remember his birth, but the fact that his dad is like, like that causes a rift between them that lasts for their entire life. He's mad at his dad because his dad kind of raised his eyebrow when he was born.
Which is also, I mean, okay, now granted, racism is absurd, and therefore you can be a logical person with an absurd quality in your life.
I suppose.
Theoretically, anyway. But I mean, it's a gut emotional reaction based on absolutely nothing. So therefore, it is therefore it could kind of be in place of somebody who in every other way is sound.
Sure,
He'll follow this, but it's still sort of. With that said, it's still, to coin a phrase, highly illogical that he would marry an Earth woman and decide to have a half Vulcan, half human child with this Earth woman. Like, you think he would know what he was getting into when the child was actually born. And
you never know until you're holding him, right?
And I will grant that you could say that, no, it's not that he's remembering when he was born. Sybok is making, is using this sort of visual metaphor for his for his father's dislike of him. Except, number one, well, in Journey to Babel, we realize that he's mad that he didn't go to Sarek is mad that Spock didn't go to the Vulcan Science Academy. Him being a human had nothing to do with his the falling out between Sarek and Spock. Number one, and number two, well, my dad did basically force my best friend to retrieve my body from the Genesis planet, and then also defended my life when I went to the past to get to save some whales and of a Klingon bird of prey. So you know what? I'm kind of over that, dude. And granted, Spock does say something similar, but very specifically, his issue with his father has been, if not 100% resolved, certainly 95% resolved.
Oh yeah, last film he said, your friends are good people. That's huge in Vulcan society. Yeah. They've buried the hatchet for the most part, or the Lurpa as it may be.
Zing.
Bing bong. But yeah, the idea of Sybok freeing them of their pain is very interesting, and it's really only fully realized in the amazing scene with D. Kelly and what he gets to act for McCoy. I was just thinking, what you said before, that's very fascinating. Clearly, Spock couldn't remember his birth. So this is Sybok kind of drawing this picture for him. And, we like Sybok, but maybe Sybok is twisting the knife a little because, again, the film doesn't really get into it, but we get that there's been this rivalry between them. And Sybok was the favored son who went off, and Spock was the mongrel that was left. And so maybe this is Sybok editing, the past a little bit and trying to sort of emphasize that. I like that. But forget all that. Let's talk about Bones killing his dad, which is so intense for a movie where we were just laughing about them breaking out of prison or whatever it was. It's an incredible scene. It's incredible performance by Kelly. And has incredible implications, I think, for the future because he's not in jail. So I'm assuming that in their enlightened future, euthanasia, there's a more positive attitude about it. In any case, it's something that as a physician and as his physician, and maybe you shouldn't be your dad's doctor, maybe that's a conflict of interest, but they both agreed with. And the real crime, there is no crime. The crime is in his heart. It's a crime of the heart. Yeah. Where he has just carried this with him forever and blamed himself for it. And the fact that Sybok can use his power to just get him to face that. It's that's, it's incredible. And it's too bad that Sybok blows up in 20 minutes because he could have revolutionized psychiatry in the future of the Federation.
There is a weird thing with Star Trek, with the Star Trek movies. And I first heard this from, Evan Dorkin, the cartoonist?
Yeah.
From Milk and Cheese. He has a podcast with a buddy of his, called Tear Them Apart, but they mention, for whatever reason, they get on this tangent, or Dorkin mentions that, Star Trek really hates the characters that they added in movies. They introduce two characters in the first movie, and they both become, beams of light. You introduce his son and Savick in the second film. One dies in the third, third film, the son dies. Fourth film, Savick basically says, "Yeah, no, you guys go ahead. I'm going to stick around here."
Right. Yeah.
This film we introduce Spock's brother, and he dies at the end. Yeah. He dies at the end, and a bunch of crew members we never see again, and a bunch of dignitaries we never see again, but they're not important.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Some of the high command of Starfleet in 6 is in 3. It's been a while since I've seen the two kind of recently. Is that right?
Brock Peters is in 4, and then he returns in 6.
Okay, yeah, 4 is 4 that I'm thinking of. And it's sort of Brock Peters is back. Oh, and it's going to turn out that he's going to, be
the bad
be
guy.
part of the Federation deep state.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't, and of course the new Vulcan we introduced will also turn out to be an agent of the deep state. Mm-hmm. Don't know why I want to say deep space. Oh, because we're talking about Star Trek.
Deep space state. Yeah.
Yeah. The Deep State Nine.
Yeah, it's
there's a joke there.
We have to,
something we can do.
We got to cut that out. I think it's weird that Spock, whose brother is in the film and is kind of the main antagonist, Spock isn't really the emotional focus of the film. And again, those intentions going awry. If we're to believe, what I've read, Shatner wanted Nimoy's character to be the focus of the film, but it, starts to creep back towards Kirk, who. And I don't know if it's a time thing or a writing thing or what, but gets totally cut. I could believe that Kirk would absolutely refuse Sybok's gift, but make a choice as to what that is. I mean, it's clearly his son, probably. Give us that scene and then let him reject it instead of just saying, we got no time, we got to get to Shakari, and having him just say, no, I need my pain, and we're not doing that scene.
Yeah.
It's true that he has already faced death. We see him kind of, not explicitly in the text, but kind of resolve the loss of David at the end of 3 and then in 4. But I just, we do set
and
up
in 6 too.
And in 6, that's true. They do bring that back. 6 ties up a lot of loose ends, and they kind of set up 6 when he talks about and Generations when he talks about I'll die alone and the family's what you make it. But Kirk, it's just weird that secret brother for one character, but the other character, we're kind of tracking his story and his emotions mostly. Yeah. Although Spock does shoot God in the face at the end of the film. If any Star Trek character is going to do it,
it's true. It's true that you would think it would make a better Spock story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is weird that it's the same old. My first love is the Enterprise, and I'll never let it down, even though it's not quite as explicit.
I give, she takes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's weird, and sort of whether it's just the ego of Shatner or whether it's sort of it's just how they kind of meted it out. But the one thing that, to your point, one of the things that to your point and to an earlier point I was making, it is about the Trinity, seemingly to my mind far more than the other films are. I mean, I think it's partially because in the second film we have Chekhov already in a life and death situation. The film opens with Chekhov getting the SETI Alpha 5 earworm in him.
Right.
But the whole crew is a definitive threat by way of Khan. And even though but it seems in 3 they're all it's Kirk's quest. But they've all agreed to commit mutiny. They've all agreed to, search for Spock, as the title holds out.
Yeah.
And they all agree to go back to, 1980 San Francisco, where this film, it's Kirk, it is Kirk, Spock, and McCoy versus the rest of the crew for a chunk of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is a weird, choice.
Yeah.
And as I said, the one kind of failing I have, and I'm assuming this has a lot to do with Shatner's ego, is that at least in the last scene, and remember, you never know whether you're going to do another Star Trek film when you're wrapping up one. It's not, It's not necessarily, particularly now that they had a new series of Star Trek on the air. I really would have liked to see all 7 of them be in front of the campfire at the end. And it's there's no reason why you couldn't have done that. It's not no, row your boat is our thing. We can't, don't put Chekhov here.
You can't have a round with 7 people and go forever. We didn't bring enough marshmelons.
Which, by the way, marshmelon? Who calls it that?
I don't know. Yeah, there's a supposedly deleted part. I don't think they filmed anything in the script where, and this is, there's a lot of hats here. But McCoy had gone into the computer bank knowing that Spock would look up camping rituals. And so he edited the computer bank to have false facts. And so Spock thinks they're called marshmelons, and that's the payoff to the joke. But in truth, McCoy is so sloshed by the time the marshmallows even come out.
It's a marshmallow. He calls it the marshmallow first.
Yeah. What do you think about the odd number curse in TOS films or in TNG films?
The TNG films to me are kind of a blur. I've not seen any of them in years. I remember not being thrilled with Insurrection and really disliking, what's the last one?
Nemesis.
Oh, yeah, and really disliking Nemesis. But it's been a long time. I might evolve in that opinion. But, in terms of the classic films, what? It is something people say. But, Star Trek 1 is directed by one of the, great Hollywood journeyman directors of all time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, even in its final form, it's not a fantastic movie, but it's a really interesting movie to watch. Mm-hmm. And it's a particularly interesting movie to watch if you're a Star Trek fan. And beyond that, it's a beautifully shot, interesting movie. Mm-hmm. Star Trek 3, I mean, I don't go back to it like I do Khan, but like every time I watch it, I'm like, yeah, this is a good movie. Mm-hmm. This is a lot of fun. And with this one, like, yes, it has its flaws. And it is the platonic ideal of, I guess, a bad Star Trek film. Like, the effects are a little shaky. The storylines don't all tie together, but I don't dislike it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is like, I think at the beginning you said this is the objectively bad Star Trek film, and it's hard to argue, no, it's masterpiece.
Yeah. That would be unwise to argue that. I just love that it goes where at that point no Star Trek had gone before and tries to talk about what people would believe.
Yeah.
One of my friends is a guy named David Mack, and he writes a lot of these tie-in novels.
David Mack, who was it Kabuki, the comic?
Oh no, the comics David Mack. They get each other's mail a lot. But one time they worked on a book. David Mack wrote a Wolverine book, and David Mack did the cover of the book. And the editor was just like, ah, ha, ha, ha. And of course, both David Mack and David Mack were like, yeah, great, it's very funny. Yeah. But anyway, but he specifically takes pains to put religion into his stories, not like that everybody loves God or something, but that the characters, you would clearly have belief. You would clearly have, even if it's just like an ethnic tradition, you think like Jews are going to go away in the future? There's no way, so obviously like people are
such a dangerous sentence that you never want taken out of context.
Right. let me just say that my girlfriend is Jewish and I absolutely want to see Jewish people in the future. But I'm just saying that like people aren't going to let go of these traditions. I'm not saying that they don't believe in their faith, but it's so much a part of who people are that you would hate to think that you'd have to turn in your card in order to get your socialist utopia food card or something like that. I don't think that's going to be the future at all. But since Star Trek is the humanist future, they never really want to like, how do we approach this? How do we attack this? What do we even want to say about it? And I like the fact that Star Trek 5 just went for it. And it's maybe a little prosaic at the end for Kirk to say, it's in the human heart. But I think that's a good philosophy to have. And he's not denying anybody else.
It's a lot healthier to have than, no, the Old Testament is 100% word for word true.
He's not denying anybody else.
Now give me your surfborn.
Philosophy. Yes, exactly. Yeah. My God, is this ship. Yeah. As we get to the end of our discussion here, any last thoughts about Star Trek V? Anything that we've left unsaid?
Yeah. This is the first film, partially because it's the first film that was in production while Next Generation is the thing, that starts to link the franchises with the first kind of peaceful interactions with Klingons. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like, even though, 6 would delve into this and 6 would kind of forget, like, yeah, no, Kirk seemed to get along fine with that young captain of the Bird of Prey, and he certainly loved Korg. Yeah, like this is the first time we see like the Klingons and the Federation working together. Yeah, even in a minimal capacity.
Yeah, it's cool to see the TNG Bird of Prey set, and corridors, keeping that together. Because when you look at like Star Trek 3, like the Klingon bridge is totally different. But having those elements in there and then reusing some of the same actors. And of course, once Star Trek 6 picks up, like that's all that it is. It's just basically a TNG movie with TOS actors.
Like Worf's descendant as the lawyer.
Right, yeah.
As the devil, as the Federation advocate.
Yeah, but Paramount's going to save money however they can. So, yeah. Well, I think that we have said just about all that we can say. Maybe they're all there is to say about Star Trek V. But at the end of the show here, since you're a first-time guest, there's some questions that I like to ask first-time guests on the show. And I like to talk about space dads. My space dad can beat up your space dad. Who's your favorite captain and why?
It's Kirk. I mean, like TOS is my favorite Star Trek show, by default.
Sure. But even on TOS, we see other captains.
Yeah, no, we do. But, I mean,
Captain Baylock.
Pike's crippled. It's
right, yes.
was he going to do blink me to death? But although actually, I'm thinking with like Strange New Worlds, I really do like, Anson Mount and the 2 episodes that exist at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
And Anson Mount's Pike is a lot of fun. And I actually like. I mean, I don't think she. No, I think in the 3rd season of Discovery, doesn't Michael become captain of the Discovery?
She takes the center seat once or twice, but it's the 4th season where she's enshrined
4th
as the
season,
captain.
okay.
Yeah,
Yes, that's right. 3rd season is they go to the future. 4th season is she starts off as captain, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, but like I actually love Michael. I love that character a lot. I think that she's great too, and at the same time, it's sort of like Kirk is my space dad because the first Star Trek I saw was with Kirk.
Yeah.
So I have to be something of a loyalist.
It's so weird, we've talked about this on the show before in the past, but like how Strange New Worlds is essentially a 55-year-old pilot getting picked up. Mm-hmm. And like most shows, a lot of shows change from the pilot to the actual production series. And we see Pike in The Cage or The Menagerie as a very different character who is... he's, at the end of a book that starts that we don't read the first part, where he's tired out by his adventures and everybody got beat up on the last thing. And so he is a different kind of man. And then he is sort of renewed by his experiences. And we're seeing that character now in Strange New Worlds. And I think that Anson Mount has really taken and ran with it. And I think part of the template is just like cool zaddy captain, who's going to cook you some ribs or something like that. But I do like the fact that he's, people always talk about how Kirk was a renegade. And of course, you and I know that is absolutely not true, at least not until the films. But I like that Pike is kind of that renegade. He's just like, all right, we've already blown this first contact. Let's just show up. Let's just show him the hand. Let's just show him everything we got. We have no other option.
To push back on Kirk just a little bit, there are like 7 episodes where Kirk is court-martialed.
That's true. That's true. But he's following the letter of the law. And Kirk, Kirk hates bullies and he hates bureaucracies.
Yes.
And so he's always going to talk the computer to death. He's always going to tear the false god down. But I'm sure that his report is immaculate that he writes about what he did afterwards. Whereas like I can see Pike being like, we came and we did some stuff and it's okay. I like his kind of more casual approach to things. Okay, now that we have reached the end of the show, normally at this point you would receive a commission in our Starfleet in the rank of ensign, but this is a special assignment. So I think that you should be doing the commissioning. TOS is full of functionaries with a questionable amount of authority over our characters on the show, like Commissioner Ferris. So if you were a Federation commissioner, what aspect of society or Starfleet would you oversee?
Ooh.
You've got you've got wings for your sleeves. You got the whole uniform and everything. What are you in charge of?
Yeah, I kind of imagine I'd be like Guinan's barback or something. I think I really just sort of like... I'll be honest, was not the greatest engineering or science student in school. I don't know, I could manage a retail store, so maybe, like maybe a command crew guy, but at the same time, I've made some screw-ups, but, barback for Guinan, I'd be set.
A lot of these characters that we see that try to push Kirk around, they are these bureaucrats that he hates, right? And so I'd imagine that, if the Peter Principle still exists in Starfleet, they're all at levels where they really shouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, my problem with management has always been a kind of like, well, that rule's stupid. Yeah, don't follow it. Just don't let my bosses see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you're gonna you be the cool commissioner who's like, yeah, maybe we'll do the reports, maybe not. Maybe we'll get that vaccine to them in time. Maybe they'll have to just develop their own immunity. They really need. Obviously, there is no federated carriers in the Star Trek's future because Kirk is always having to do the deliveries.
Yeah.
Of medical supplies and whatnot. Well, Commissioner Mazel, thanks for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. And if people want to continue the conversation, and they can, at EISTpod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
I'm like at Joe Mazel 1, I think, on Twitter. Also ABCDTOS has a Facebook group. Which I comment on occasion.
Sure.
Also, there's ABCTOS. Listen to the podcast. It's fun. We talk about stuff.
Yeah. Are there plans to kind of keep it alive once you get to Wolf in the Fold? And all that stabbing of women?
Yeah, after Wolf in the Fold, there's going to be a brief hiatus. People are going on summer vacations.
Sure.
Pete has 2 kids, Tom has a son, and John also has a son. So they got to worry about that stuff.
Sure.
Families, like nerds.
I hear they exist.
Yeah. But we're definitely going to do the 6 movies, possibly 7 movies.
Awesome.
And after that, though, that's kind of like, that's up in the air. We've tossed around ideas like doing a Columbo podcast. If you listen to the show, we're very big Columbo fans, except for Pete.
I forgot to ask you if anybody in the movie had been in a Columbo.
Oh, Lawrence Luckenbill.
Which one was Luckenbill in?
It's a later episode. He's a murderer. It's one I've never seen, actually, but he's the star of one. And Nimoy, of course, Nimoy and Shatner.
Yeah.
And according to Walter Koenig, also Chekhov has a small role, or Walter Koenig has a small role. Do you remember when we saw him do the Q&A? He was like, somebody asked about the Questor tapes. He's like, let me tell you something else about Columbo. Did you see the Walter Koenig Q&A? Because that was the day after we met.
Okay. No.
Yeah, at one point somebody asked him about his brief part in the Questor tapes. He just talked about his brief part in Columbo. I think it's the William Shatner episode, but I don't remember. And it's been a while since I've seen the one. I don't know. Point is, Walter Koenig, by the way, very charming.
I was, definitely. I was probably at the James Cromwell one.
Yeah, you told me. You and Diana told me about that. Yeah,
yeah. These older actors, maybe the hearing's not so good, but somebody asked him what it was like, working with William Shatner, and he's like, "Oh, I worked with him before. Yeah, I was on the original Star Trek." And I think he meant that he had been on Barbary Coast with William Shatner in the early 70s. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that there's criticism I can make of that convention, but just going to Mission Chicago, meeting guys like you, had so renewed what already was a pretty high love of Star Trek. So like you know what? I'm going to finally watch Deep Space Nine. And I've gotten through about 11 episodes since then. I'm going to finally... I sort of had a lot of loose ends with the newer shows, and I caught up with the card, and I'm still a little behind on Discovery, but not as far as behind as I was. Yeah, it's just like I kind of left Chicago just thinking like, wow, I really love Star Trek.
It's really great. I forgot where we are on our sign off here, but anyway, definitely check out ABCDTOS. And Joe, thanks again for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been great.
We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed. Backtracking is back for an all-new season. Hi, I'm Caliban.
And I'm Gooey Fame.
And we'd like to introduce you to Backtracking, the podcast that explores the real-world inspirations behind your favorite episodes of Star Trek.
From historical events to classical literature to blockbuster films, we go where no pod has gone before to seek out the origins of classic Trek tales.
Did you know, Gooey, that the TNG episode Too Short a Season was an allegory for the Iran-Contra affair?
Yeah, only sweatier. Did you know that the Enterprise episode Regeneration was an homage to the John Carpenter film The Thing?
Archer and T'Pol freezing to death over a bottle of whiskey would have been a controversial ending.
As a dog lover, Archer would not like The Thing, I'm guessing.
Oh my god, movie night is canceled. Join us every other Thursday for a journey back to the beginnings of the Trek universe.
Backtracking is available wherever you get your podcasts.
No, Porthos!